Do you ever wonder if your stress and anxiety is being caused by your genes? Well, the answer is probably yes and no. Keep watching to learn how to determine your individual genetic predispositions and then overcome them using practical functional medicine strategies. You don't want to miss this one. Maybe you've heard the phrase nature versus nurture. It's a quick way to describe how things like personality traits and health issues are passed down by our parents, biological and otherwise. Some things we inherit via genetics. This is the nature part. And some things we inherit via experiences we're exposed to throughout our life. That's the nurture part. But, as it turns out, when it comes to wellness, there's nothing versus about it. Instead of nature versus nurture, much of the hand we're dealt is a result of both. It's more accurate to say nature and nurture because our genes are constantly interacting with their environment to produce a different outcome. This is why the answer to the question, is my anxiety genetic, isn't a straightforward yes or no. But we can wholeheartedly say that understanding your genetic tendencies can help you reduce anxiety and live a healthier, calmer, more focused life. That's a definite yes. While symptoms of anxiety have many triggers, we know that one of them is excess buildup of certain neurotransmitters in the brain, specifically adrenaline and dopamine. These chemicals help the brain talk to itself and the rest of your body, and your brain needs to be able to break them down and clear them out when it's done with them. That's because both adrenaline and dopamine function as stress chemicals, and if they hang out too long or overwhelm the brain by building up, they can be inflammatory and toxic. When the part of your brain that's responsible for higher level thinking, like decision-making, planning, organization, and the ability to self-monitor and control our responses to life and our goals, when that frontal cortex is saturated by adrenaline and dopamine, it has a harder time keeping our subconscious emotions and fears under control. This is where fear-based thinking and behaviors start to show up in the form of anxiety, ADHD, and even OCD. Basically, the brain isn't able to calm itself because of all that lingering adrenaline and dopamine, keeping the brain all jazzed up. Not only does a brain flooded with adrenaline and dopamine trigger anxiety, but it also makes you more susceptible to chronic pain, high blood pressure, heart palpitations, insomnia, brain fog, and poor memory. So, where do your genetics come in? In order for your brain to break down adrenaline and dopamine in a timely manner, you need to be able to perform a chemical process called methylation. How efficiently you're able to methylate depends on several genes, one of which is named COMT. I'm going to call it COMT for the rest of our discussion to make things a little easier. Here's the tricky bit. Many people, especially women, have alterations to their COMT gene. They're called a single nucleotide polymorphism, or SNPs for short. And in this case, they make people inefficient methylators. Some people refer to these genetic SNPs as defects, but I don't like that because sometimes SNPs are actually helpful in certain circumstances. So, what are the chances that you have a genetic predisposition to too much adrenaline and dopamine? Well, COMT polymorphisms, or SNPs, are really common. About 80% of European and North American people have at least one SNP in this genetic region. And one SNP slows down the methylation activity by 3 to 4 times. Now, Before you freak out, turn me off, and resign yourself to a life of predestined anxiety or pain, we need to talk about the flip side, because there are some potential benefits to having increased levels of dopamine and adrenaline hanging out in your brain. People with COMT SNPs are often very intelligent, detail-oriented, focused, and have a good memory, as long as the system isn't overstressed. Neither adrenaline or dopamine are bad in and of themselves. They're just a problem when they're too high or too low. We want that perfect, Goldilocks-inspired, just right level of both. So how do we get there, even with the disadvantage of inefficient or sluggish methylation genes? Well, just because you have a COMT SNP doesn't mean you'll automatically have problems like anxiety or chronic pain. As many of my functional medicine colleagues like to say, genetics loads the gun, but the environment pulls the trigger. This means that everything from your hormone balance to sugar intake to micronutrient status can work against you or in your favor. Remember, nature and nurture, not nature versus nurture. Here are 5 strategies you can use to improve your methylation efficiency and calm your anxious brain. Number 1, assess your genetic status. There are many companies who are willing to sequence your genome via a simple at-home collection kit, but they're not all created equal and don't always interpret the results specific to methylation. My one-on-one consultation clients have access to specific and reliable genetic testing to help determine if COMT SNPs are present and to help us craft functional medicine strategies to compensate for them. I'll put a link to learn more about working with me in the show notes. Number 2, increase your intake of methyl donors like folate and choline. Even if you have a COMT SNP, your body can always make more copies of the enzyme that's needed to methylate, but you have to have enough methyl donors to get the job done. By eating loads of whole, nutrient-rich foods that contain folate and choline, like eggs, salmon, chicken, legumes, dark leafy greens, and nuts, you can overcome your genetic inefficiency. If you know you're low, supplementation for these methylation factors is always a great option too. Number 3, reduce estrogen dominance. Excess estrogen slows down COMT function, which then causes dopamine accumulation in the brain and creates anxiety. If you know your estrogen is too high or you're carrying too much body fat, which can then produce even more estrogen, it's time to give your body's hormone metabolism a boost. Unsure about your estrogen status? Consider doing the Dutch Comprehensive Hormone Test. I'll put more info about that in the show notes for you, along with links to some free estrogen-related resources. Number 4, optimize melatonin levels. This immune-supportive neurotransmitter reduces dopamine and adrenaline levels in the brain. And it also reduces cortisol release from the adrenals, which helps lower overall inflammation and helps tone down your chronic stress response. Many of us, because of excess screen time and poor circadian rhythms, don't make enough melatonin. And supplementing at night is an easy way to help reduce the symptoms of sluggish COMT function. Number 5, increase L-theanine intake. L-theanine is an amino acid from green tea that reduces dopamine and adrenaline in the brain, and it's also anti-inflammatory. But for those with COMT issues, a casual cup or two of tea isn't going to cut it. You'll typically need higher doses at the beginning to see symptom relief. Thankfully, it's easy enough to get in supplement form. Having concrete action steps is great, and an individual plan is even better, but if you take one thing away from this discussion, I want you to remember that your genes aren't your destiny. You are not doomed if your grandparents or parents have anxiety, heart disease, obesity, cancer, or any other condition that tends to be passed down in families. You can optimize your environment so that the trigger of that loaded gun of your genes never gets pulled. And functional medicine can help. Take this video as a sign that you're ready to take the first step. Get your hands on the resources I've provided in the show notes and on my website. Find out if your genetic predispositions need a little extra boost, and ask for help by applying for a one-on-one consultation with me. And keep an eye on this channel. There are more videos on topics like this coming soon, so be sure to subscribe. If you found this video helpful, please consider hitting that thumbs up button. I would really appreciate that. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.